those that run those operations is a different and a tricky issue. And it's not different in the covert operation than it is in a non-covert operation. And this is where the issues of audit disclaimers should be taken seriously, and we should have no tolerance for such incidents. Because when auditors cannot audit because people say the information is not available, the signal that we give to you, the signal that we give to the public, is for us to disclaim an opinion and say, we wanted to look at this, but we could not have access to that information. And for us, it's about, therefore, what therefore should the public attitude be towards those issues that keep constantly being hidden from the auditors. And that's why we should have very little tolerance for municipalities that have got disclaimers. We should have very little tolerance for government departments that have got disclaimers, because that is a smart way of hiding information, knowing that no consequences are going to happen on disclaimers. And I'm glad that there is now some toughness and firmness around issues of disclaimers. You made reference to the issues around public works and many other operations that they do. I mean, for us, that information is a lot less sensitive than the information that is, for instance, in the work of the secret services institutions of government. And when you look at our reports, look at it in terms of to what extent have we been able to have access to everything that we needed to audit. Because remember I said, before we launch into any area of audit, we look at the risk. Risk is about where the money is spent the most. And there's little chance that we'll miss areas where money is spent the most. Risk is about where abuse can happen the most. You know. So now when we come back and say we wanted to look at that, but we did not have access to that information, that is something that even in your reporting, you must put a certain context in terms of the lack of tolerance to that kind of information. If you look at the report of Public Works, it's one of the worst reports that even the minister has made comments about to respond to and make sure that he deals with the issues of systemic lapses, systemic failures in that department. They themselves, in many projects, including the project that you all have major interest in, have commented that because of the systems, they found themselves sometimes not even knowing what was going on. They found themselves in a situation where the amount of spending has far exceeded what should have been spent, you know. And those are the systemic issues that our reports highlight. And our view is that we should look at approaching this thing from an internal control perspective. But there's nothing in the Secrecy Bill whatsoever that, in our view, can prevent our ability to scrutinize and have access to anything that is high risk in government that we ought to pronounce on. I hope, unless there's another question on the secrecy issue, so that I can exhaust that, and then we can move to other conversations here. It looks like that's covered.
Are there other questions? Is there a question on the Secrecy Bill?
Of the Auditor General. So as a result of what you are saying, the Institute of the Auditor General didn't see any need of making some submissions with regard to the bill itself, or I'm aware that some Chapter 9 institutions did make some submissions indicating their reservations with regard to certain provisions of the bill.
True, yes, because our study of it had nothing that really would compromise the way we should do our work, because everything that's there does not contain us, does not restrict the way in which we should do our work and the way in which we should comment on our work. And the Public Audit Act, we're happy that it's adequate enough, because we've got to also be responsible. We've got information that is so important that if we're reckless about how we put in the public domain, it can truly compromise the security of the state. And that's why when such incidents happen, we've got to get confirmation and concurrence from the responsible ministries to make sure that there's nothing in our report that has got the potential of damaging the security of the state. But nothing in there will deter us from commenting on issues of abuse and maladministration in the system. And I think that's adequate enough for us. Yeah. Yeah.
But you get approached to say, look.
No, we don't. And I'm glad that has never happened. And I don't think in the posture that we have been able to portray, anyone will have the audacity to even contemplate that. I mean, that's not the way you operate here. You know.
Raymond Lowe, FXI. There's one follow-up question to your statement. From what you've been describing as to how you react to questions which may impinge on state security, you're obviously keeping certain information away from the public. To what extent does that in fact exist? What is the amount of information that you keep away from the public? There must be occasions, for instance, where you have discovered irregular spending on an issue which involves state security. How can you deal with that? Or do you deal with that directly with the minister concerned and not in the public domain? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an important question. Remember I said, nothing will deter us from commenting on issues that are about the irregular and abuse of and maladministration in government. Anything else, we've got no business in commenting on issues that will compromise on the security of the state. And the public, if they don't hear it, it's irrelevant for them anyway, because it's about the protection of their own security and the security of the state. We may just come across it because of our access to the government operations. But if it does not compromise abuse of power, abuse of resources, we don't feel a need to really put it in the public domain because it's not part of our reporting responsibility anyway. But anything that is touching on what you've just said, we will never be in a situation where we put it under the carpet.
Did I see a hand at the back? Sophie and Amina.
On the question of accountability, but also to ensure that those who have erred are punished. Auditor General, don't you think it's wise perhaps that the Act should be amended to ensure that you have powers to enforce the recommendations? You look at what Public Protector is able to do. At least she's trying to ensure that there's accountability and those who have erred are being punished. Why can't the same apply to you so that you have those powers? Because it doesn't help to give a report and point out the problems when there's no action. And it looks like in the country, people don't get, scared, by the Auditor General's report because they know there won't be any consequence.
I thought you were going to add that they're not scared because they're not going to be the only ones. There's just going to be 3 paragraphs somewhere towards the end of a story on page 5.
Yeah, thank you very much, Auditor General, for your address, and we do read your reports. It's difficult to remember all the detail that is in there and the stories that we're unable to follow up. We certainly do not have the capacity. But should we not work towards, more synergies? To touch on your disclaimers, and that is the area that worries me personally, wherever I am. One of the things that really sticks is the unspent billions by municipalities. We all know, and we're in the midst of very violent protests by municipalities, people in municipalities, on service delivery and other issues. And certainly these are related. Unspent billions by municipalities, but the services are not there. 20 years in our democracy. You touched on shortcomings and not acting on shortcomings. How can we address this? And this is linked to the questions of my colleague Sophie there. Should we not review perhaps the cycle, the processes, the enforcement of Auditor Generals worldwide? Isn't there a need for another declaration, whether it is a Johannesburg declaration following on the Lima and Mexico declaration, to perhaps aim at enforcement of your very valuable work that you are doing in our democracy? Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Is there any other question? Yeah.
I'm Zororo Mavindize from the FXI. And basically my question is, it's not really a question, but it's a comment which is in addition to the previous comment. Recently there were reports that the AG's office red flagged the SABC's reports. So I just want to add on to the point of enforcement of controls. Are there any specific programs that are being launched to ensure that public institutions such as the SABC do comply?
I think they are related. They say that there are journalists who are able to count and those who can't count. So I don't know how many questions we have. How many do we have on the table? 3. Oh, okay. We'll come back to you.
Thanks for raising another theme, because all these 3 questions have got a similar pertinent theme around what can be done to respond to issues of accountability and consequences a lot more decisively, and suggestions of perhaps looking into the powers and the responsibilities of the Auditor General. There's a project that we are working on as part of the working group that I was chairing. This project actually emanated from Johannesburg when we had a conference here in 2010. That says, what are the... Can I have water? Sorry. What can the Auditors Generals do to make sure that action gets taken on those? Thanks so much. Action gets taken on those that neglect these glaring observations. And one thing we realized that as Auditors Generals, we've got different systems across the world. And we agreed that what we need to do is to have a comprehensive study of how the Auditors Generals operate across the world to deal with this issue, how the various parliamentary jurisdictions operate across the world to deal with these issues, as well as the executive. And this project, I know it's going to take a long time, is chaired by our colleagues in Jamaica. And we're halfway through that exercise. But we felt we're not ready to put it to the Congress in China, and therefore we said we're going to defer it to the Congress in Abu Dhabi in 2016. You may think 2016 is far, but in our calendar, 2016 is around the corner, given the amount of work that has got to be done. This is a project that, once it's out, is going to give us a very clear understanding of what makes the system of the French to have a better handle on issues that deal with follow-up and consequences. What makes the issues in the Arabic region to work as effectively in certain areas? What makes the systems in Latin America to operate better, because all of us operate somewhat different systems. What makes the systems in the Commonwealth jurisdictions to work in a particular way effectively? And all these systems have got goods and bads. But what we don't know as auditors generals is how everybody else operates. I mean, it's information that when we conceived this project, we said we need this information because we keep contradicting ourselves, we keep wishing we could be having different responsibilities, yet we don't know what works, what does not work in those other jurisdictions. So my suggestion here is that perhaps, I know you may say 2016 is a long way away, but once that project is out, I'm sure with the team that I've just introduced you to, which you know very well, I want to task them now to make sure that they bring that to this forum so that we can have a much more concrete debate about what works, what does not work in the various jurisdictions. Bring that to our parliaments so that we can be able to say, this is what works in other jurisdictions. If we are to consider legislation that will strengthen the way the Auditor General operates here, at least we do it from an informed source. At the moment, I think it would be somewhat of a reaction that's based on frustration, but we may not well think it through. And the research that is happening within Intosai may be very valuable research to help us to answer this question. I don't think it's all lost because there are interim interventions at the moment, which I believe we need to optimize until we get parliamentarians to do their work effectively, until we get the executive to do their work effectively. And we cooperate a lot more better as Chapter 9 institutions, because all these three opportunities, none of them are working optimally at the moment. You get in parliament and legislatures scopers that are working in isolation to the portfolio committees. For the past 4 or 5 years, we've been saying there's no way it can ever be effective if you fragment your operations. So I still believe that what we have not optimized is where our solution lies at the moment. I don't believe it's in the change of the AGSA legislation, not by any stretch of imagination. I think it to be taking shortcuts that will get those that should be doing better off the hook. So that's including the issues of having no tolerance for issues of internal controls that are weak. Chair, with your permission, let me just highlight one of the issues we're beginning to bring into our PFMA audit conclusions this year. We found that, and we are happy that Treasury is warming up to this issue, that you look at any legislation of public finance in South Africa, or any legislation around service delivery, or in compliance with the laws and regulations, there's very little, if any, reference that is made to internal controls as a catalyst for good reporting. Every legislation is touching on the end game, which is the reports, but nothing is emphasizing that internal controls are as equally mandatory to producing those good reports. And we want a situation where these internal controls can somehow be given some teeth, some strength, whether in regulations or in legislation, for us to see some traction in the kind of things that keep evading us and being slippery and getting through our fingers unnecessarily. Yeah. So that's the loophole that we think we've picked up in the system at the moment. Yeah. But changing our legislation, I think it's too premature in our view.
Well, that was the address by the Auditor General Terrence Nombembe talking about SA Media Freedom Day, as well as how the Secrecy Bill won't affect the media and getting all the facts and delivering them fairly. After the break, I'll have more news right here on PM News.